Next, we have Gary Ball.
Mayor, Alderman, thanks for letting us be here and talk about this. Pretty much kind of reiterating what Jim said and John. Anyway, I lived in that neighborhood for 51 years. Probably, except for her, I've been in Raytown. She's been in here I moved there when I was 9 years old. But anyway, I've lived in that neighborhood. I've owned 2 pieces of property there. There's never been a serious accident. There's never been an accident of 2 cars running together. If you take that street and you go down that street 10 times in a day, maybe once out of the 10 times will you meet another car going the other direction. There's several cars travel that street daily, but not that many times do they meet head on like that. If they do, generally the people will wait at one end of the street or the other, and this is why we're talking about this ordinance. Put up like you would at a 1-lane bridge, like Jason brought up before. Yield to oncoming traffic. Drop the speed limit to 20 miles an hour. It used to have, years ago when I first bought the house on the corner of 70th Terrace and Willow, where I lived for 30 years, sure that there was some 20-mile-an-hour speed limits on that side. And then we got up, when the kids was there, children playing signs in there, finally got a street light put up. I know when I was a teenager, that street was not paved through. And I mowed part of the yard down there, which is now the street. I have here a plot, Andy Knoll and staff, this all, if you know the right people in Raytown, like it's kind of been brought up, if you know the right people in Raytown and you want something done, you talk to that person and we'll sneak this in and we'll get her done. And this is what happened here. Because you didn't get the people, like Jim just said, the only people that was notified was the 8 or 9, 10 houses whose driveway come onto Willow. This time, they were called or notified that we were going to have this meeting here tonight, both sides. Again, they only notified the 8 or 9 people that lived on Willow. Jason, who owns 1/8 of the end of that street, got property there because his driveway doesn't come out there. Again, he was not notified one way or the other. So not only did they not do it the first time, they've done it again, not been notified. But what I have here, when talking to Andy Knoll, he said that street needed to be 19 foot wide, maybe could get by with a little less because right now it's 11 foot wide and it's been that way. I guarantee you when it was paved the first time, and it has not been paved in 17 or 18 years, and I don't know an exact date, and it's in bad shape. But when it was first paved, it was only about 9 foot wide. And they paved it a couple times, and it is now 11 foot wide. But here is the plot for Loveland's addition. It shows Willow, and there's an easement there that's 16.5 foot wide. So it's already there. It's already there, and this was plotted in 1922. And so if you know, they don't have to go out and spend a ton of money to buy easement and stuff like this. If the street has worked for 45 years at 9, 10, 11 foot wide, can you imagine what kind of a street it would be if it was 16.5 foot wide, not buy any more property? Or just, Andy said, 18 might get by with 18 or something, 17 or something. You're talking another foot. It needs to be repaved. We just, for the first time since I can remember, had a serious police incident down there on Willow. Police cars didn't seem to follow that one-way sign. I mean, they had their emergency flashers on and everything else, and Willow was blocked quite a while. Helicopters was overhead and everything else. But we've got the kids riding the bicycles down that street the wrong direction. They're not going to go a mile around. They're not going to go and get out up to Raytown Road and everything else. This has been working, and I have lived there. And 7 years ago, I moved across the street onto 70th Terrace. I have lived there longer than anybody else has. Well, Jim, good fellow, he's been right there about that long too. But we haven't had a problem. You know the right people, you can get something slid through. It happened. Now we've got to go back, and when you've got this many people here over something that if the people in the neighborhood, 70th Terrace and 71st Terrace, had have been notified the first time, you'd have had half this many people here at the beginning. It would have never happened. It happens supposedly because somebody's yard's been drove in. I am wanting to see evidence. Somebody come out there, drive the street. Show me evidence where somebody's driving in somebody's yard. Probably happened in the winter when somebody got stuck, but my God, they were stuck on Raytown Road, Gregory, 70th Terrace, 65th Street, and everything else. And having lived on that corner house for 30 years, you know, if you move into a house on a narrow street, you might ought to take some of the responsibility. If you move into a house in a floodplain and it floods, are you going to tell the city move the river? If you move into a house that sits high on a hill and you can't get it in the snow because of the winter, okay, cut the hill off. I moved in there and somebody drove in my yard because it's a narrow street. Maybe a little bit of that responsibility is yours, but there's not been, I drive that street every day. I haven't seen somebody rutting up the yards. If anything, it's been Jason's.
Mr. Ball, it's not a fun job to keep people on the timer here. Believe me.
That's fine.
But before you leave, I'd ask you to close. But I'd also like to hear from you and the individuals that want to speak to us about this. What is the solution you would prefer?
What I would prefer, put it back the way it's been for 45 plus years, and it's worked with no accidents. You have ordinances on the book. If somebody is driving in the yard, you get a license number, which I have done. You file a complaint, you turn it into the police department, the police does their job, we hope, will take care of it. This has happened in the past. You've already got things in to work.
So your preference would be to take it back the way it was?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anything else you want to close with?
Okay, yes. Put it a one-way street, make an ordinance to go back with yield to oncoming traffic signs, and post it at a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. I mean, it's a narrow street. It needs to have a low speed limit, maybe 15.
You were very patient with us. You came up at the last meeting, and I appreciate you doing that, and I appreciate you coming out tonight as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Jesse Ball. And then Clara Ball will follow Jesse. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. I agree with Gary. Of course, he's my son, and I've lived out there for 51 years on 71st Terrace, and like we travel that road every day, and we've never had a problem. If there is 2 cars on that street at one time, everybody's been courteous. Never have I ever run into a problem there. So, and we weren't aware that somebody wanted it one way until this last meeting that we had. And that's just a week or 2 before that was when they made it one way, we were not informed, and somebody should have realized that there's more people travel that street than the people that live there. And the people that live there, do they always want to go out the same way? I don't think so. And I think that there's more people travel that street than a lot of people realized. That's the way I feel about it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Clara? And then Jason Porter follows Clara. Good evening.
My name is Clara Ball.
Drop that microphone down a little bit so we can hear you. Thank you.
Like this. I have lived on 71st Terrace for 51 years. And since our son had lived up there on the corner of 70th Terrace and Willow, we made lots of trips, and we still do, up and down Willow Street. And in all of these years, I've never had anybody be discourteous to us when we're passing. And like one of them said a while ago, you might go up and down that street 20 times and not ever meet another vehicle. It's been a good street for a lot of people who want to go either way, like somebody said, to 75th or go the back roads. All of us old people don't like getting out on Raytown Road, and now we're supposed to do that to get back to our house. One other thing, the street has not been worked on for I don't know how many years, and there's lots of holes in it now. And before they changed it to a one-way, when you go down Willow going south, if you turn on 71st Terrace, right there at the end of Willow is a bridge and a little creek. Every year, I call the street department to see if they would come out and cut the brush and the trees around that creek because you cannot see there. I have not called them this year, and nobody's come out and done it. But I'm 80 years old, and I could take my clippers and go down there and do what they do when they do trim it. But that's at the end of Willow. So I say, put it back like it was. That's what we need. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for coming out. Mr. Porter.
Good evening, Mayor and Board. I think I spoke last time about making that a two-way street with a yield sign at each end of it. I don't know. I guess to speak to Mr. Azir's concern about the public being notified, I own an eighth of that street. It's a side of my house, and I wasn't notified. I never got a letter in the mail, a visit from a gentleman or nobody. So I can understand the rest of these people, you know, who just all of a sudden one day go to turn down that street and they can't. I think it was last Sunday night, there was a state trooper followed some gentleman into a street there, a house there on Willow. And I saw an officer coming down 70th Terrace, and he turned the wrong way down Willow Street. Unbeknownst to him, that street was a one-way. I talked to him later, and he said he didn't know about it. So there's a police officer that didn't know about that street being made one-way. So the communication to the public seems to be just a joke. I don't know. To me, I do have people driving my yard. I've tried to plant seed there, and right now I have some rocks there to still get my grass to grow. I think it was Andy Knoll, I talked to him. I asked him if I could put up a curb on my side of the street there, and he said, well, I couldn't do that because it would impede traffic. That street's in disrepair. I'm mowing my yard, and most of the time I find chunks of that street 20 feet up into my yard where people are having to drive on the side of the street, and it just chips the street off. I could bring you buckets and buckets of asphalt that I picked up out of my yard. If anyone you would give me an address where I could drop those off, I'd be glad to. The garbage man told me he didn't appreciate me putting the stuff in the trash can because it tears up his trash truck, and he showed me a hole in the bottom of his trash truck that he had to have repaired because I was throwing that asphalt away in my trash can. So anyway, something needs to be done here. Whether it's a one-way street, I think going to the north is the wrong idea. It causes problems trying to get out. That's a hill. In the wintertime, people are going to have a hard time getting out of that street. It cuts off main access to the south. Is I think a topic near to you guys' hearts, that Walmart project out there. Well, I got to go a mile out of my way to get to Walmart now, whereas before I could just hop, skip, and a jump, and I'm right there. I don't know. It seems to me that the thing that makes sense, and these guys have said it's been that way for 40 years, make it a two-way street. Put a yield sign like you would on a one-way bridge in the country. Yield oncoming traffic. It's the people that don't know the area, that don't know that that's the way that street is, that abuse it. You know, most people that travel that street, they stop before they turn and they look to see if there's oncoming traffic. If there is, they wait. They wait for that traffic to clear. It's the impatient kids that want to just tear through the street and make it a two-way street again with yield signs. Reduce the speed limit if you got to. That's fine. It's a narrow street. There's blind spots. That's my recommendation.